extension made in 1999 and is called the Black Diamond because the surface, as you can see, is entirely covered in black marble from Zimbabwe, and it's angled 7 degrees over the water, so that when sun hits the water just right, it is reflected on the surface and it shimmers like a black diamond, which is a great idea until you remember we have no sun in this country. And apparently the only time of year it works is 7 in the morning. When we got to the other side of it, on the back you can see the remnants of the Royal Library from 1898. It kind of seamlessly mixes in with the modern version, so the old and the new together. Up ahead we have this big glass block. This is blocks, and it is DAC, the Danish Architect Center of Copenhagen, designed by the Dutch for some reason. But it is made in the image of Legos, which is a Danish invention. We made Legos, which is a combination of 2 Danish words, like gut, which means to play well. And the idea is that every Danish architect grew up as a child, finding his passion for architecture by playing with the toy. Hence, it is a love letter to Legos stacked on top of each other. On the inside, in the middle floor, you can find social entrepreneurship startups that work on sustainability. At the very top, luxury condos and gyms, cafes, and a small exhibit for architecture. Legos were so popular in Denmark that it is one of the only countries on earth that actually got beat out. They beat out Barbies when they came out at the time. So the Danes played so much with that toy. But we have another canal coming up, Flax Canal, and we will be docking for this bridge as well. Please prepare. Christian IV, he went into a lot of wars that he lost. You are about to find out why. But first, a brief bridge interruption. Please remain seated. Up to your right, you see this big red brick building. This is the brew house of Christian IV, and it was made in 1618. Back then we had a problem in Copenhagen because we had no sewer systems, which meant a lot of gross stuff that we're not going to mention because apparently tourists don't like to hear about that, but we had very unclean water, which made us a lot of people sick. So we banded together as a people and came up with a very Danish solution to the problem. We took all of that dirty water and we turned it into beer. Yeah. So we filled that entire building with thousands and thousands of liters of beer, and Christian IV loved the idea so much that he decreed that every person working for the crown and every soldier in the kingdom would get 10 liters of beer every day for the family and the children. Afterwards, we lost pretty much every major war we ever went into. Coming up in the horizon over here on the right hand side, this is Slotsholmen, which means Castle Island. It has been the main center of royal and political power for the past 1,000 years in Denmark. But we're going to be docking under this bridge and then we talk a bit more about it. Slotsholmen is home to the castle where we had both kings and politicians to this day, Christiansborg, and we're going to be seeing the front side of it in just a moment. But in here is the back entrance to Christiansborg, where we have the royal stables. To this day we have about 20 horses that still operate in there, with this bridge coming up in front, which is a bit special. It's a bridge like any other, but this one's pretty. It's the Marble Bridge. It is the only bridge that survived the Great Fire in 1794, where most of Copenhagen burned down, and it leads into the royal stables. It's very beautifully decorated, unlike many of the other bridges, because it's the oldest one and it did not burn down, where most of the city did. We had more money before, as you can see in the decorations. But it's also a bridge. Remain seated. So looking at the decorations also on the other side of the bridge, you can kind of sort of remember, or imagine what Copenhagen might have looked like before the fire, before we got a little bit more from. Up ahead is another bridge. But this one's even more special because this is the Storm Bridge. And it is named after the storm of the Swedes that came in the start of the 1700s, where they had taken most of Denmark, and the only thing they were missing was Christiansborg, the castle in there. If they had won and taken the castle, perhaps there would have been no Denmark today. But we held more than 1,700 Swedes back on that very bridge, hence the name Storm Bridge. It was made out of wood and quite a bit more narrow back then, so they burned it down and we built a new one. And this one is extra narrow, so it's very important that everyone keep their elbows at the inside of the boat and remain seated at all times. And then let's see if our trusty Captain Peter will bring us through to the other end unscathed. As you gaze upwards, you can see ancient cave paintings from 10,000 BC. This is a very narrow canal. It's actually so narrow that this boat we are on right now was designed just to maneuver through this one passage. If it was any longer, we would not be able to turn. If it was any wider, not be able to go through. The narrow squeezes over, but now comes a very, very tight turn. So everyone, this is actually Peter's first day on the job. So please keep your breaths and give a very big applause if we make it through to the other side of our road. Ladies and gents, the man has done it! Give a big hand to Peter! Woo! Talking about great Scandinavian males. On the right hand side, you see this yellow building over here? This is the Museum and Mausoleum of Bertel Thorvaldsen, one of our greatest artists in Danish history. He came to us in the start of 1800s, and he was such a good sculptor you will be able to find his work spread out all over Europe. He, at the age of 11, showed promise, so we sent him off to Rome, where he spent 40 years perfecting his craft. And he is today the only person of non-Italian descent to have his art represented in the Vatican. He made the mausoleum for Pius VII, the Pope at the time, which is today within the Vatican. So as you can imagine, back then in 1844, when he returned after 40 years, Denmark had lost Norway, Sweden and large parts of Germany and was a small country again. So that means Thorvaldsen was a big deal. Yeah? So when he returned home, as you can see depicted on the side of the building, this is what it looked like when Thorvaldsen returned home, and after 40 years, to the Danish coasts, and we welcomed him home like the king that he was. The man is buried on the inside in the courtyard, and this entire museum was built just for his drafts. His original works are spread all over Europe, and he was so good that just the drafts made it to fill this entire museum. But the man ended his days on Earth with just as much style as he lived through it. You see, one day in 1844, the last night of his life, he left a dinner party with friends and family, got up in the middle of it and said, "Enough, I need peace." He went down around the corner to the Royal Theatre. He sat in his favorite seat and listened to his favorite piece of music from his favorite orchestra, and he died straight in that seat, coming out with as much class as he lived through life. In the middle of that museum in the basement, you will be able to find that very seat on which his butt had its final moments. We took it out of the theatre and put it in the glass casing, and you too can see it in the basement. Quite a sight, ladies and gentlemen. But onwards to the next man. This man sits atop a horse to your left, right behind the metro elevator. This is Absalon, the founder of Copenhagen, and after Christian IV, the most important Danish man in our history. You see, he was part of one of the greatest romances in the Danish history, and after we dock on this bridge, we shall continue this tale, because he was adopted into a very rich family. It was so rich that their last name was Rig, which means rich. Their oldest brother, who was of the same age as his adopted brother, became Valdemar the Great, one of our greatest kings. And those two brothers teamed up because they had a plan. They wanted to civilize the Danish people, turning us from Stone Age folks into a Middle Age city. How did they do it? Well, they made thousands of churches throughout the entire country, with him becoming Bishop Absalon and his brother becoming king. They built also what you see on your right hand side, Christiansborg, the very first monarchy castle, where in the ruins basement of this building you will find the first castle that they built in 1167, those two brothers. Since it has been rebuilt 5 times and only burned down twice. In here, in 1850, we got democracy for the first time, and ever since our House of Parliament sits within. Mette Frederiksen, our proud Commander-in-Chief of Prime Ministers, sits within these walls as well as well as our Royal Reception Halls and our High Court of Justice. The highest point in all of Copenhagen, literally, is this tower of 106 meters, and you can go for free every single day in an elevator in front of the back of the building, all the way to the top, and look over all of Copenhagen. You might be asking, why did it burn down? Was it the Swedes? Was it the Norwegians? No, it was ourselves. We forgot candle fire in the windowsill twice. Please sit down, thank you. The third time around we learned from our mistakes and we made the entire thing out of rock so it couldn't burn down again. And since it hasn't, but that doesn't mean that our dance with fire is over, because as I said, it's a better theme. And this year we have a continuation of this very theme. Ladies and gentlemen, on your right hand side, our newest edition of burning our own city down, Børsen! The ruins that well, thankfully not today, this year, the 16th of April, burned down. Eerily enough, on the 5th anniversary of the Notre Dame fire in Paris, it burned down. After 400 years of being there, Christian IV built this also. It was actually the first mall, arguably, in European history, where the idea was, it rains too much in Denmark, so we have to have a place indoors to do trading. As you can see, it just doesn't really ever rain when we need it. On top, you had a spire of 4 dragons entwining their tails into a spire. These 4 dragons represented, ironically enough, protection from fire. But it is also the only building in this entire area that didn't burn down at least once in 400 years, so maybe if they had added a 5th tail, it would still be here. Lower bridge, folks. Your right hand coming up, we have something called Kayak Bar. Kayak Bar is part of a summer offer we have for tourists here in Copenhagen during the summer, where you can get a free kayak for rent if you promise to take a small bucket with you and clean up trash along the canals as you go. We used to have some of the filthiest canals in all of Europe, and today we are proud to say we have the cleanest.